They used to be the wildest kids on American screens, and now their real lives have turned out even rougher than the movie. Nearly 50 years have passed since the Bad News Bears first ran onto that baseball field and made America laugh and cringe at the same time because of how grubby, stubborn, and completely unpolished they were. But what makes this story worth watching now is not just the memory. It is time. And time has not gone easy on any of them. The little girl pitcher who walked into the movie with Oscar glory already on her shoulders grew up surrounded by addiction, heartbreak, and a stroke that nearly killed her. The man who carried the biggest weight in the film became forever linked to one of the most haunting deaths in Hollywood history. The most rebellious kid on the team vanished from the screen, then years later came back and earned an Oscar nomination. This is not just about how different they look after 50 years. This is about what really happened to the faces who made the scrappiest Little League movie in America. Are you ready to find out what happened to their lives? Number 1. Tatum O'Neal. Amanda Whurlitzer. Tatum O'Neal was born in 1963. When the Bad News Bears came out in 1976, she was 13 years old. This year, she is 63. In the movie, she played Amanda Whurlitzer, the Bears pitcher. But honestly, Tatum was never just a little girl in this movie. By the time she walked into the Bad News Bears, all of Hollywood already knew her name. Before that, she had won an Oscar for Paper Moon and became the youngest person ever to win a competitive Academy Award. The studio knew exactly what they had, too. AFI says she got $350,000 plus 8% of the net profits. The kind of paycheck that showed Paramount saw her as a real star, not just a kid they needed to fill out the team. After the movie, Tatum kept landing notable roles in films like Nickelodeon International Velvet and Little Darlings. From the outside, it should have looked like everything was going beautifully. But her life did not go that way. Tatum went through a stormy marriage with John McEnroe and battles with drugs. That is the sad part of this story. A child who stood way too close to the top, then grew up carrying way too many cracks. In 2020, she overdosed, suffered a major stroke, and fell into a coma for 6 weeks. But thankfully, by 2025, she was able to stand up and speak at her son's wedding. To me, that is the part of Tatum O'Neal people should remember most now. Not how famous she once was, but the fact that she managed to get back up after all that damage. And after a child star who burned bright that early, this movie takes us to a completely different face, older, more worn out, and carrying exactly the bitter edge that defined American cinema in the 70s. Number 2. Walter Matthau Morris. Buttermaker. Walter Matthau was born in 1920. When the Bad News Bears came out in 1976, he was 56. He died in 2000 at 79 years old. In the movie, he played Morris Buttermaker, the coach of the Bears. By the time he took the Bad News Bears, he was not a man still looking for a place in the business. He already had an Oscar, he was already a major star, and Paramount paid him $750,000 plus more than 10% of the theatrical rental revenue, a number that tells you just how much the studio believed in him. And what is even better is that after the success of the Bad News Bears, Walter did not fade back at all. He kept going through the 80s and 90s with first Monday in October, then Dennis the Menace, the Grass Harp, and especially Grumpy Old Men and Grumpier Old Men movies that pretty much sealed his image as the cranky old guy American audiences loved for years. And what is even more impressive is that his health had not really been good since the 70s, but he kept working steadily and even appeared in Hanging Up in 2000, his final film before he died in Santa Monica. When I look back at Walter Matthau, I do not think of a star trying to hold on to his glow. I think of an actor who had mastered his craft early and then gave his whole life to it. Leave a comment to remember and honor him before we move on to the third name. Number 3. Jackie Earle. Haley Kelly Leak. Kelly Leak is the kind of character who changes the whole atmosphere of the Bad News Bears the second he shows up. Jackie Earle Haley was only 15 when he played that part. He was born in 1961, and by 2026, he is 65 years old. What is interesting is that Jackie did not walk into the movie as a total unknown. He had been doing commercials since he was very little, and by the middle of the 70s, Kelly Leak had pretty much turned him into a teenage icon for American audiences. The easiest way to put it is this: Walter Matthau held the frame of the movie together, but Jackie brought the energy that made the whole thing a whole lot less well-behaved. Looking at what came next, people had every reason to think Jackie was headed straight for a big, smooth career. He stayed with the next two Bad News Bears sequels, then added Breaking Away. But Jackie's acting life did not follow that easy, predictable path. For a long stretch, he was almost completely gone from the front line of Hollywood, moving into commercial work and living far from the spotlight, a lot farther than most people who remembered Kelly Leak probably ever imagined. Then, in 2006, he came back, and not just to make a quiet return. Little Children brought Jackie an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor, and after that, he gave people more unforgettable roles, like Rorschach in Watchmen and Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street. Number 4. Vic Morrow. Roy Turner. Roy Turner is the kind of coach who can take half the fun out of a game just by standing on the sideline. He does not need many words to put pressure on people. That tension comes naturally, and that is exactly why Vic Morrow fit the part so well. Morrow was born in 1929. When the Bad News Bears came out in 1976, he was 47. He came into this movie already as a familiar face on American screens, somebody who had made an impression in Blackboard Jungle, and then really broke through with ABC's Combat, the television series that earned him an Emmy nomination in 1963. So Roy Turner was not some throwaway supporting role handed to him just to fill space. He was brought in to carry the weight of the grown-up world against all the chaos and innocence of the kids in the movie. After the Bad News Bears, Vic kept working steadily. He went right on appearing in miniseries and television films in the late 70s and early 80s, which shows this was not an actor who had already run out of time and just happened to stop by this movie. But when people look back at Vic Morrow today, it is hard to separate his name from The Twilight Zone. The movie set accident on July 23, 1982. The tragedy that killed him and two child actors shook all of Hollywood and led to new safety standards for helicopter scenes. He died that year at 53. Number 5. Alfred Lutter III. Ogilvie. You remember this kid, right? Alfred Lutter III was born in 1962. When the Bad News Bears came out in 1976, he was 14. In 2026, he is 64. And what I like about Alfred is that at first glance he seems like one of the quieter pieces on the Bears, but if you look closer, you realize he was not picked just to round out the roster. Before becoming Ogilvie, Alfred had already appeared in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, The K, and even played the younger version of Boris in Love and Death. So by the time he joined the Bad News Bears, he was already a seasoned child actor with real experience and a very distinct kind of screen presence that anybody who loves American movies from the 70s would spot right away. But the best part of Alfred Lutter. The third story comes later. He came back as Ogilvie in the Bad News Bears in Breaking Training, then pretty much left the screen for good. And this is the part that really makes me laugh, because it is so unexpected. Alfred went to Stanford to study engineering, earned a civil engineering degree in 1984, then a master's degree in management and engineering in 1988. After that, he founded Lutter Consulting, then went deep enough into tech to become CTO of Cumulus Media e-Star offering and lynda.com. In other words, The nerdy little kid on the Bears grew up pretty much exactly the way the 1976 movie accidentally hinted he would. Some kids leave Hollywood and disappear. Alfred left Hollywood to build a life a whole lot sturdier than his childhood roles ever were. Number 6. Ben Piazza. Bob Whitewood. Bob Whitewood is not the kind of character who steps out and takes over the whole screen. He is the kind of guy who helps the story get started, then steps back at just the right time. Piazza was born in 1933. When The Bad News Bears came out in 1976, he was 43. He died in 1991 at 58 years old. In the movie, he was Bob Whitewood, Toby's father, and one of the people who helped pull the Bears into the game from the very beginning. On screen, the role feels pretty ordinary, but Ben Piazza, in real life, was anything but a lightweight. He studied at Princeton, worked in theater, wrote plays, wrote books, and built a career deep enough that people later remembered him more as a strong character actor than the kind of star who stands in the middle of the poster. Encyclopedia of Arkansas even notes that when he was young, people compared him to Marlon Brando, but he ended up building a path of his own, one that was steady and far less noisy. After The Bad News Bears, he kept working steadily through I Never Promised You, A Rose Garden, The Blues Brothers, Mask, Clean and Sober, and then Guilty by Suspicion in 1991. The Los Angeles Times called him an actor of Broadway film and television, and I think that description alone says a lot. Number 7. Joyce Van Patten. Cleveland. Joyce was born in 1934. When The Bad News Bears came out in 1976, she was 42. In 2026, she is 92. In the movie, she played Cleveland the league official, who was clearly not on the Bears' side. The role is not big, but it fits Joyce Van Patten perfectly tight solid and not one bit too much. What makes it interesting is that behind that supporting role sits a very deep career. Joyce moved from Broadway to film and television across such a long stretch of time that just looking at her resume tells you she is the kind of actor who built a career on stamina, not noise. After The Bad News Bears, Joyce kept showing up steadily on screen in movies like St. Elmo's Fire Monkey, Shine's Marley and Me Grown-Ups, and a lot more besides. She also comes from a family that runs deep in the acting world as the sister of Dick Van Patten and the mother of Talia Balsam. So when I look back at Joyce Van Patten, I do not think of a star who flared up and burned out. I think of a woman with a long career, a strong stage foundation, and that kind of presence that makes people feel like they know her, even when they cannot remember her name. Number 8. Chris Barnes, Tanner. Boyle. Tanner Boyle is the kind of kid who lights up the whole Bears team the second he opens his mouth. He is hot-tempered, loud, stubborn, and that is exactly why he became one of the most memorable faces in the movie. Chris Barnes played that role when he was just 11. He was born in 1965, and by 2026, he is 61. What I like about Chris is that he did not need a big role in the usual sense to stay in the audience's memory. Chris was not somebody who just flashed by once. After The Bad News Bears, he came back in. The Bad News Bears in Breaking Training then added a few television roles and specials for young audiences in the late 70s and early 80s. But looking back now, it is obvious that Tanner Boyle is still the name most tightly tied to Chris Barnes. Chris's later story went in a very different direction from what people usually imagine for child stars. His career was pretty short and basically came to a stop in the early 80s, and maybe that is exactly why the details of his later life sound even stranger. Chris was paid about $3,000 for his first 5-week film shoot, with part of that money set aside under child actor protection laws. By 1998, the Los Angeles Times wrote that he, at 32 years old, had called family court from Utah, where he was working in a flower shop, to claim the savings bonds that had been set aside from his childhood earnings. Number 9. Erin Blunt. Ahmad, Abdul Rahim. Erin Blunt played that part when he was just 13 years old. He was born in 1963, and by 2026, he is 63. What I like about Erin is that he did not come into this role as some kid who had loved baseball since he was little. In an interview, he said himself that on the day he auditioned, he did not even like baseball, and he was dressed nothing like a kid about to be in a sports movie. And somehow he still ended up becoming one of the first Bears to get cast. After the Bad News Bears, Erin came back for the Bad News Bears in Breaking Training and the Bad News Bears Go to Japan, and he also showed up in titles like The Waltons, Happy Days, Car Wash, A Hero Ain't Nothin' But a Sandwich, and Hill Street Blues. But the thing that makes Erin's later story stick with me most is something else. He once said a lot of people told him they played baseball because they saw Ahmad on screen. I think that is no small mark at all. It was a childhood role that was not loud or flashy, but it still hit exactly where it needed to. The most recent public sources also show that Erin has stayed connected to entertainment, especially through DJ work. Number 10. Gary Lee Cavagnaro, Mike Engelberg. Some faces in the Bad News. Bears do not need a lot of lines, do not need some big scene, and people still remember them the second they show up. Mike Engelberg is that kind of character. Gary Lee Cavagnaro was born in 1963. When the movie came out in 1976, he was 13 years old. In 2026, he is 63. In the movie, Gary played Engelberg, one of the boys who made the Bears look exactly like what they were, a patched-together, awkward but very real team. What I find interesting about Gary Lee Cavagnaro is that the road he took later on was a very quiet one. He did not have a long screen career like some of the others. He did not have some big comeback either. But sometimes people like that are exactly the ones who make the memory of a movie feel more real. In 2013, Panini America said Gary was living in the Dallas area and had come in to sign commemorative cards for a Bad News Bears collection. In that conversation, he still remembered the heat during filming, very clearly remembered Tatum O'Neal throwing the ball over his head, and remembered what it felt like being on a set full of kids. Gary may not have been the brightest shining name on the Bears, but Mike Engelberg is still a very real part of that memory. And then, right after The Boy, people remember, just from the way he looked, this movie takes us to another face, smaller, more awkward, but just as hard to forget. Number 11. David Pollock, Rudi Stein. David Pollock played Rudi Stein when he was 15. He was born in 1961, and by 2026, he is 65. What I have always remembered about Rudi is not some heroic big moment. It is actually the opposite. He is remembered more as the kid Buttermaker practically had to tell to just let the ball hit him so he could take his base. It sounds funny, but that ended up being one of the movie's hardest details to forget. David also did not just do the role once and disappear. He stayed with Bad News Bears for 2 more movies, enough for the name Rudi Stein to stick tight in the memory of a lot of American audiences who grew up with the series. What makes David Pollock's story interesting is that his life later on pretty much went in a completely different direction. He left acting in the early 80s, became a certified flight instructor, then worked at Rocketdyne, where he analyzed NASA budgets and moved into business development. After that, he went even deeper into public service in Moore Park, California, going from the school board to the city council, serving as mayor pro tem, and then in 2016, even running for the California State Senate. A local article in 2022 said David wrapped up nearly 30 years of public service. That is what I like about David Pollock. Rudi Stein on screen looked like the weakest kid on the team, but off-screen he ended up walking a very long road, very steady, and honestly, pretty impressive. Number 12. Scott Firestone. Regi Tower. Scott Firestone is a pretty interesting case because unlike a lot of the other Bears cast members, his public record is so thin that even his birth date does not show up clearly. Scott played Regi Tower, a pretty quiet red-headed boy who played infield and first base, while his dad was way louder than he was at practices and games. Maybe that is why Regi was never the kind of character who came charging out to grab attention. What I like about Scott is that his story never got blown up into some oversized legend. It is smaller, more private, but honestly pretty likable. Later on, public records show he also appeared in Wish You Were Dead and Broken. Not only that, Scott also got credited in writing, and on Broken, he also had a directing role. Apple TV lists him as a writer and director, not just a former child actor. In other words, the quiet kid on the Bears did not exactly disappear, it just looks like he stepped away from the front of the screen and moved behind it. And I think that fits Regi Tower pretty well, a face that was never loud, but still belonged in that picture in a very natural way. Recently, Scott also showed up in a reunion photo with a few former castmates, enough to show that the memory of the Bears has not completely drifted away from them. Number 13. David Stambaugh, Toby Whitewood. Toby Whitewood was not the kid who made the Bears get noisy every time he showed up. He was more the kind of child who made you feel like this team still had at least a little order left in it. David Stambaugh played that role when he was 13. He was born in 1963, and by 2026, he is 63. What made Toby different from the other boys on the team was how closely tied he was to the very reason the Bears were created in the first place. Toby was the son of Bob Whitewood, the man who spoke up so kids cut from other teams could still have a chance to play. So Toby was not just another team member, he was almost part of the foundation. In the movie, Toby is also remembered as a calm kid who sounded more mature than a lot of the others his age. I have always thought that was one of the nicest things about the Bad News Bears. In the middle of all that messy kid chaos, the movie still made room for one boy who kept the rhythm instead of stirring everything up. David Stambaugh did not just get tied to one movie and disappear, he stayed with Bad News Bears through all 3 original films. Before and after that, he also worked pretty steadily as a child actor, doing commercials, television stage work, and even the soap opera Love of Life. But he did not hang on to Hollywood. David studied at Messiah College, went on to study theology, and then moved into ministry. Public records show he served as a campus minister and later worked in several churches in New Jersey, California, and Connecticut. I like this story because it feels so seamless. Toby Whitewood on screen was already the most grounded boy on the team, and in real life, David Stambaugh grew up in exactly the direction of someone who would spend his life caring for other people. Number 14. Timothy Blake. Mrs. Lupus. Mrs. Lupus only passes through the Bad News Bears very quickly. If you watch the movie again, a lot of people might even have to pause for a second to remember who she was. But that is exactly what makes Timothy Blake interesting to me. Some people in a movie are not remembered because of screen time. They are remembered because of the whole career that stands behind that moment. TV Guide and IMDb both confirm Timothy Blake appeared in the movie in 1976 as Mrs. Lupus, and that was just one of many credits she built up from the 1960s all the way into the late 1990s. That list includes The Odd Couple Laverne and Shirley the Ropers, Beverly Hills 90210, and plenty of other television shows. In other words, she was not somebody who just passed through Hollywood and vanished. She was the kind of actor who kept working steadily, quietly, and for a very long time. But what makes Timothy Blake worth mentioning here is not just her acting. IMDb Deadline and SAG-AFTRA all show that she was also deeply connected to the Actors Union world, a former national vice president of SAG, a former recording secretary of the Seiji Foundation, and a trustee, as well as executive officer of the Seiji Pension and Health Plans for nearly 3 decades. In 2015, SAG-AFTRA honored her with the Ralph Morgan Award, an award given for outstanding service to the profession. And just like with so many old childhood movies, the closer you get to the final name, the more you realize there are faces who barely appear, but still help make that movie's world feel more complete. The last person on this list is one of them. Number 15, Bill Sorrells, Mr. Tower. By the time I get to this last name, what stays with me is not just a supporting role in the Bad News Bears. It is the feeling of the whole world standing around the bears, the world that makes this movie feel more like real life than some neatly arranged story. Bill Sorrells played Mr. Tower, Regi Tower's father. He was born in 1933. When the movie came out in 1976, he was 43, and now he is 93. His role is not big, and it does not come with the kind of moment that makes the audience cheer right away. But the more I go back and watch movies like this, the more I appreciate faces like Bill Sorrells. They are not there to grab the spotlight. They are there to give the whole picture more depth, with parents' rules and grown-ups standing outside the field, but still fully belonging to that world. And Bill Sorrells was not actually somebody with a thin resume at all. After the Bad News Bears, he kept going pretty steadily through television and film, with credits like Heaven Can Wait, The Howling Chips, Scarecrow, and Mrs. King Highway, To Heaven, Fletch, and The Bold and the Beautiful. He is exactly the kind of old Hollywood actor whose face people remember more easily than his name. Looking back at the Bad News Bears cast after 50 years, what stays with me is not just who is still on screen, who turned toward a different life, or who has been gone a long time now. It is the feeling that a small, dusty little movie that felt so purely American in 1976 still holds on to its human heartbeat, even now. As for me, the older I get, the more I appreciate movies like this. Not just because they are fun, but because they hold on to the faces of a whole era that is now very far gone. And that is what really makes a video like this worth doing. Not just to ask what they are like now, but to see how powerfully time has moved through people. Which face in this cast surprised you the most when you looked back after all these years? And if you still remember the first time you saw the Bad News Bears, I really do want to know what moment that memory started with.